Welcome everyone back to the arena with your guests, MD and me, Matt. Today we have another special guest. Her name is Tori Peyton Wilson. This is Tori's second time appearing on the show. She was so good we had to ask her to come back, and she was so generous to say yes. So for those that didn't get a chance to first go around, Tori's a lot of things. Christian, mental health advocate, writer, content creator, also the founder and host of the Keep Growing Pod. I think she's in school now. If I'm caught up on her social media to do social work and really focus on all things mental health, specifically around eating orders, OCD, just giving her personal story. So for those that weren't able to tune in for the first time, for the first conversation, who is Tori Wilson, and what do you hope? What if someone's listening to this right now and is still listening? What can they expect to learn or gather by the end of this conversation, or what do you hope?
No, that's such a good question. Also, you made me sound really good, so thank you. Um, it's so funny because when I talk about my story, I always talk about like I was just that girl who had hit rock bottom with all of her mental health things like a few years ago, and it's been so cool how just genuinely leveraging the resources God's given me and reconnecting with him and really focusing on going all in with my journey. I'm like completely different now. And I do mental health advocacy. Yeah, I'm applying to schools right now. So I'm going the fall of next year. I'm so excited. I'm going to do macro social work so that I can work in nonprofits and hopefully create my own nonprofit at some point. But yeah, I guess like honestly, at the end of this conversation, what I always try to tell people is like when you're listening to me speak, like I don't want to influence you to like me. I want to influence you to like you and to see the things and the areas in your life where you need to grow. My platform's called Grow with Tori. And that's the whole thing is like we all have areas in life where we need to grow. A lot of what I talk about is mental health stuff. And so if you can even identify a couple areas where you're like, wow, this really hit me and I do need to grow in that area, like just let that be your takeaway from this conversation.
And so when you talk about your rock bottom, what was that ultimately, we may have touched on this, but that's okay. But what was that rock bottom moment for you? And you mentioned you're a completely different person. Like when you look at that person relative to who you are today, like what would someone on the outside have noticed?
That's such a good question too. Okay, I think honestly, my personality is completely back. When I had hit rock bottom, yeah, there was like OCD stuff I had to work on, trauma I had to work on, but the big thing was an eating disorder. And I had struggled with it for 5 years throughout college into my early 20s. And I just kind of got to the point where I realized I was on the bathroom floor sobbing and I just engaged in eating disorder behaviors. And I almost feel like it was like God's voice that cut through all the noise in my head and was like, Tori, you either get better now or you just give up. Like it's one or of two options. You're going to continue down the road that you've been and you're going to be miserable, or you're going to actually try to recover and things could get a lot better. And so I really took that opportunity of like hearing, really feeling like it was this like Holy Spirit moment to call my mom and go get help. And that's always what I tell people is like, honestly, that Noah Khan song, Call Your Mom, that's
Let's
the
stop there
first.
real quick, because you're
Yeah.
very Christian and faith oriented. And we hear that a lot. Like when you say you felt God speak to you, it's like a Holy Spirit moment. Like for someone that's searching for that is like, I hear this all the time, but like, how do I actually hear that? I never hear God. Like from your perspective, like, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like?
Oh my gosh,
And I
this is
understand
so
it's kind of a
good.
hard experience to describe, but just like from your
Yeah.
perspective.
No, I love that because I was literally in First John this morning and God had just like been speaking First John over me and I was like, "Lord, why do you want me in First John?" But this is probably why because I was reading First John, I think it's chapter 1 verse 5, and it says God is light and there is absolutely no darkness within him. And so in that moment where I was just sitting on the bathroom floor, all I felt was darkness. You know, like all I felt was the overwhelming thoughts, the nothing's ever going to get better, the should I be here anymore? And then it was almost like this clear cut voice of lightness. And it was small. It was very small, but the darkness didn't overwhelm it because it kind of came through. And it was like, Tori, things could get better. Like, they really could. It was just that little, like, beacon of hope. And so that's why I love when people describe God. Like, I've always seen God as a God of light and hope. I've never really struggled with I mean, I've struggled with seeing him as, like, the all-powerful disappointment, all of that stuff. I think that's really, like, embedded in our culture of where we just see God as this, like, judgmental, disappointed figure, but that's really, like, when you go through mental health things, you realize, nope, he is hope, he is light, he's, like, cheering you on, biggest advocate, like, and I think that is what I felt come through in that moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Tori. And again, glad to have you back with us here. And I think when I hear some of these stories, and especially with yours, I can start to develop this assumption that, like, in that moment after that, it's just smooth sailing, total upward trend, green arrow, no interruptions. And something that we had talked about recently on this pod was, and I think it was mostly about my experience with this, is um, I feel like I've hit my rock bottom more than once, or like I feel like if not the bottom, like I feel like I've taken the steps back, or I've revisited versions of myself that are not in line with that upward trend. So help like us understand in your experience from this moment where you see this small light cut through the darkness, it delivers a sense of hope. You start to turn things around. Speak to maybe how, like, maybe it's not this linear growth trajectory, and maybe where you're at with that today.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that Christians will often try to tell the linear story of, I found Jesus and he changed my life and things were rainbows and butterflies, period. That's just not realistic. And that's honestly not really biblical. I mean, even David, who's like kind of known as one of the best figures in the Bible, a man of God, he literally experienced like all of these different things after he found Jesus, including cheating on his wife with Bathsheba, like killing a man. So it's not linear because life's not linear and we live in a broken world. I will say after I decided to get better, it was less of like the day in and day out. I knew there would still be struggles and I knew I would still kind of hit those little rock bottoms and hit like the ups and downs of the healing journey. But it was more like at the end of the road, I knew I would reach the finish line. Like I knew things would be okay. I think that's what's cool about hope is it doesn't mean that you're not gonna take steps backwards. It doesn't mean that things aren't gonna still be really hard sometimes, and you're gonna have versions of yourself that, like, you don't, like, come back up, and you're gonna have to work through it and, like, get back through it again. But what's cool about hope is, like, in the end, like, everything will be okay. And so, I think it's just that, like, I knew even in those moments where I, had little relapse moments or just, like, those going backward moments in some way, I always told people it's not really going backwards if you're still, like, learning from your mistakes and allowing it to propel you forward. I don't know, I think the linear journey and sorry, I know I'm talking a lot about it, but I do feel pretty passionately about it, because you always see these, like, on social media, the girls with the eating disorders where it's like, "I gained weight and got my life back," and it's like, "No, that's not how it works." It's like you gain weight and then you're like, "Crap, should I lose it again? Because now I feel like I'm overweight and the eating disorder voice is still there," and it's just so messy and complex, and I think if you can just really focus on that hope of, like, the future self who is going to just feel more confident, is going to be, like, the person that you wanna be, that's, like, what allowed me to keep propelling forward even through the ups and downs.
Yeah, and how much, like, did that also, because you just mentioned something really interesting around the idea of weight gain and weight loss and, being a woman in that sort of world, and so, like, how much do you have to battle, like, the external voices and the noise on a day-to-day basis while on this healing journey? And, like, what were you doing to maybe stay away from that noise, silence that noise, or maybe the noise didn't get quieter and you had to empower yourself to overcome that? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why when I first started eating disorder recovery, I started a social media platform because I was just expecting voices to be like, "Tori, you looked better before. You were hotter then. Like you gained weight. What happened?" And I just wanted to, even if no one was actually thinking that, put it out into the world that I don't care what you think, and I'm doing this for myself, and I'm doing it because I know there's like a happier, healthier version of myself in the future. I think it's really easy when you're going through any sort of change. Like humans just don't like change, and they don't like it when other people like recognize change outside of them. Like if you're changing your weight, like people just don't like that. They don't like when people like notice external changes. And I've seen that a lot with like people that I've interacted with in my DMs. And I think what's hard is in recovery, you really have to say, I genuinely don't care what you think. Like I genuinely like just you have that self-empowerment, which is so cool, where you're just like, "It's about me, it's about God, it's about my journey, it's about the people I care about, and everyone else can just kinda, like, shut up," in a kind way, but you just kinda, like, tune out those voices.
It's interesting because I something similar for me. I think, and I also went to social media like after I started to work through my stuff and just become more self-aware and self-accepting of who I am, and even more recently, so like making the decision really to come out and post, like fully come out and post it on my social media, make a reel about it. And I was worried. I'm like, it's like people are gonna think this is an attention grab, and I want, support. I look at me, accept me, and I think really what really resonated with what you said with me was this is true. This was truly for myself. This was what I needed to do for me personally to tangibly move forward and close a chapter of my book and let myself walk into this next chapter. Like just me. Someone else might not need to do that, or someone else might have other ways of self acceptance and kind of moving forward. But that's what I felt like I needed to do. And so that really resonates. And how cool is it that by doing so, you get to inspire others literally just by being yourself? Like
Yeah.
how I just guess like talk. I see your face smiling, my face is smiling because I think it's such a beautiful thing to to know that again, it's not necessarily why I do what I do, but I'm fully aware that because the road of living an authentic life is less traveled, and having the courage to share a lot of who you are on social media for the public to, I mean, accept or criticize. One of the byproducts of it is you get to inspire. I mean, I'm sure your DMs are filled with, wow, Tori, like what you did, what you said. And it's like, well, that's cool because I was just being me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. That's my favorite part, honestly, is seeing the DMs where people trust me so much that they'll ask advice, or they'll just say like, "Tori, you changed my life." And I'm like, "How?" Like, "No, no, 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 no. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was you," which I truly do believe. But what's been cool about this journey is I feel like social media can be such a dark space, and even people in different niches in social media, like, yeah, they're showing you a part of their life, but it's not always the authentic part. Like you have a niche and you're doing lifestyle, so you're showing people this amazing life, but it's really only 10% of your life. But we get to do as mental health creators is something really unique, which is show like the 100% messiness and craziness of our brains all the time and just be honest about our journeys. And I think that's why I love the mental health community so much, because we're just ourselves, and like we're all kind of like a big family in like the best way. And so I will say like it's been amazing to, yeah, inspire people, but also just find this community on social media that actually feels really safe. Like I feel so safe in the mental health community, which is amazing.
And what's one belief that you've changed, whether about yourself or life itself, that has changed your life or that has dramatically shifted, the way you move through the world?
That's actually crazy. I had the same question.
Wait, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, I was
And
about to ask that.
it's crazy because like literally the first thing that popped in my mind was healing is possible. I hear all the time of like, "That's awesome, Tori. It happened to you, but it's not going to happen to me." And I'm like, "But you don't get it. I was you 5 years ago." Like everyone has that moment where it's like they think it's all that they're different. Like, and I just want someone listening to this to know you feel like you're the only one that has these crazy thoughts. You feel like you're the only one in this situation, who's been through the trauma, who's had the experiences that you have, but you're not. You're not alone at all, and healing really is possible. It's gonna take a lot of hard work, it's gonna take community and resources and probably faith in something, and but it's still possible, and I say that as someone who genuinely, again, did not wanna be here 3.5 years ago.
And so when you think about, it's interesting because I was doing a little personal branding. Personal branding is not one of my favorite things to do. Like I'm very comfortable being myself, but like when it comes to like, how do you define yourself? What is your niche? Like, who are you helping? How are you? I'm just like, this is hurts the brain. So I hired someone to kind of help and take an outside perspective and kind of help me figure that out. And they asked me like, what are three core beliefs to your like that you believe to be true? I'm like, man, that's a loaded question. Like, how much time we got? But what one of them that came to mind was change is possible, which it didn't sound like I wanted to sound like very articulate, but that was the truth. And I think it relates very much to what you're saying, which is like I used to feel like that this was just the way things are. And you feel so stuck, you feel so trapped, but you all and this might be another one. You always have a choice. I think if I could boil down my life, it would be you always have a choice because it really didn't feel like it for most of my life, and I'm sure maybe you felt the same. But I guess I'm just curious, like what you mentioned you're in the DMs a lot, which is great because I think you can learn a lot about your
Yeah.
about the world just by like going through those, and you obviously get a lot of them. What are you hearing from people? I guess more generally, like if you could sum up, the DMs you get, whether it's just mental health more broadly, whether it's eating disorder specifically, like what are people really struggling with?
Yeah, I think eating disorders specifically is a big one that I talk about in the DMs. And it's just that fear, that tension of, I want to get better, but I don't want to gain weight. And that's a hard one because I think that's the core fear and
Can you
desire.
have those? Can those both coexist?
100%, 100%. Because here, the thing is, like, yeah, that's everyone's thought. When you're contemplating recovery, you're like, okay, I actually want to feel better. I don't want to have this voice screaming in my mind 24/7. But I just don't wanna, like, physically change, you know? Like, I just wanna keep the eating disorder is basically what someone's saying. And so, that's a hard one. I think that's when people are still in the pre-contemplation phase where they're, like, not really sure if they wanna go all in or not. And as a mental health advocate, I can encourage, I can inspire, but it takes, like you said, you have to make the hard choice. You have to be like, "Okay, I'm gonna do it." Like, I'm terrified to gain weight, and I'm gonna jump all into recovery. So I will say that's like a big one with eating disorders. And then I think with just general mental health, it's so weird to me because I feel like we're so advanced in 2025, but just shame. Like literally shame is the biggest thing that I feel like people deal with. Just not wanting to tell people, not wanting to tell even like their closest family and friends, which like maybe I was just really blessed to have an environment where my parents were like, open up, tell us things. Um, but yeah, people just they're so ashamed and they let that keep them from getting help, which is really unfortunate.
And so, I think we've talked a lot about people maybe wanting to change, or feeling maybe hopeless and like they can't change. And for the people that want to change and maybe are less worried about gaining weight, losing weight, but maybe are just confused because there's so much mixed information on how to think about food. I'm curious, like, how you would describe your own relationship with food, and maybe how difficult is it to develop that sort of relationship when, the food service industry is like heavily commercialized, it's advertised in ways that maybe don't serve everybody. So would love to just educate anyone listening on Tori's current relationship with food and maybe some narratives or beliefs that you've had to really work on, in terms of like how you thought about or viewed food and eating just in general.
Yeah, wow, and that's so complex and such a journey. I'll say at the beginning, I really think you do need some sort of professional help or guidance. I know that's not available to everyone, so even, like, using a they have, like, intuitive eating support stuff online, and I'm happy to share resources, but you really need to get on a meal plan at the beginning. You truly do, because you need to expose yourself to lots of food and different types of food like every single day. It's exposure therapy. That's literally what the beginning of eating disorder recovery is. So 3 meals with carbs, fats, proteins, and then I would say 3 snacks with like 2 of those. So like a carb and a protein or a carb and a fat. And you just kind of do that honestly for a good like year plus. I'm not even lying. Like you got to be on the meal plan for a long time because it's reinforcing to your brain that food is safe and food is okay and you're not just going to gain a ton of weight like eating like a normal human being. Like that really is a normal amount of food to be eating. Now that I'm, let's say, I think 2.5 years into my recovery journey, I really am more on the intuitive eating side. So it's taken me probably 2 years to get fully off of my meal plan. A big part of that is because, again, it's complex because you're adding in exercise, you're taking away exercise. You have to like just really reframe how you view food and exercise. And that is a long, hard process. They always say if you struggled with food for 5 years, it's going to probably take you double of that to fully heal. That's just how eating disorders work. It's a really, really hard thing to treat, but it's very possible. Now again, I'm more like intuitive eating, so I can add snacks, take away snacks. I always usually stick by 3 meals unless I just randomly have like a brunch at a dinner one day. But I think there's still some safeguards that you have to do. Like knowing that I have a history of an eating disorder, I always have to like be very protective over that. And so I am very like cautious of like not skipping meals, making sure I'm like getting enough food in, monitoring how does my body feel day to day, and then also like monitoring exercise because that's something that no one talks about. And it's like I can't just go do like a triathlon right now because I know it'll trigger me at some point, sure, but I'm only 2.5 years in, so I'm like not for me. So it's really complex, and hopefully I described that well, but yeah.
No, and I think it's great because something you had mentioned there was intuitive eating. And I'm always so curious about that because your intuition maybe is even something that needs to evolve in a sense. And I'm just curious, like, for somebody who, and Matt, you and I, we've talked about like triggers that trigger behaviors that maybe don't serve you. And I'm just curious, like, what does it even mean to eat intuitively? But also, like, how have you noticed your intuition around food maybe change over time? And what does that even mean?
Yeah, so I think truly intuitive eating does have to start with that meal plan of consistent eating, of consistently fueling your body. Because if you start with intuitive eating, especially from a disordered perspective where you still kind of know you want to restrict, you're going to be using intuitive eating like it's seen on social media as something to regulate your hunger and make you lose weight. Because we never see intuitive eating online as a way not to lose weight, which is not what intuitive eating is. It's supposed to be truly listening to your body. I think once you're on a meal plan, once you stabilize your weight, we all have a set point weight. It's actually like your body kind of likes to stay within a good 10-ish pounds of like, say someone is 6 foot tall guy. I don't know. He likes to stay between 180 and 190 pounds. That's like how his body actually is. It's actually really cool, like a set point weight. And we just have to trust that our bodies have that. Once I got to my set point weight, from just fueling and making sure that I'm giving my body what it needs and resting and all of that, I noticed pretty quickly that the intuitive eating kind of set in because I was at a healthy weight. So my body knew what it wanted and it knew when it wanted it. And so I think we have to trust that set point weight, that when we get to a healthy weight, our body will tell us what it needs and how much it needs. That said, and again, sorry I keep going on and on, but it is so complex. I can't just answer it in a like one little point. I will say too, even now, like there are key things where it's like my body might not be craving a carb in the morning for breakfast, I still try to add a carb because I know I need it to fuel my day. So intuitive eating is also knowing your body and knowing, okay, I'm not like necessarily craving this morning or like really feeling like I want this, but I know I need 3 food groups like at my meals. It's just knowing and using your knowledge that you've built up to create like whole meals and snacks. So,
I find myself, me and MD talked about this, but I would say, we all have vices. I think mine, when I'm, and normally I would say the biggest trigger for me is being tired. Everything gets slow. I need my sleep, and as soon as if I wake up tired, I already know I'm gonna have like some inner battles, and usually where I go is food. Like that is my vice, if you will. Like I don't struggle with alcohol, drugs, doom scrolling. I think I've recognized in myself that's where it is, and so throughout the day, I'm like I'm praying to God in moments. I'm like, God, please, like just take me. I know I know I don't need this. So I guess my question is like, how do you think about, especially, I think you will have an interesting perspective on this, just given your journey and your expertise in eating disorders. Like, how do you think about gluttony
mm,
when it comes
yeah.
to the, yeah,
Okay, yeah, that's such a good question. From my perspective, I think gluttony comes usually from this idea of mental restriction. So you're gluttonous because and this is just speaking from an eating disordered perspective. This is what I've typically seen. When women are experiencing binging, when women are experiencing, oh, I have such a craving for a food, it's because you've created a mental boundary restriction in your head that that food is not something you can have. So I experienced this when I had an eating disorder. I would restrict all the time. I'd be like, nope, cakes, can't have that. Cookies, no, no sweets. So I would go to an event and they would have sweets and I would eat all of them because I would be like, oh my gosh, I never get this. I want this. And I think we just have to honestly, gluttony is putting almost food as an idol, like on a pedestal. And a lot of the way that we can fight that is just by neutralizing food. Food is food. Like I eat a sweet treat every single day. And so I don't have these like desires to go like to the store and binge on sweet treats because I let myself have it every day. I see it just as neutrally as I see a salad. I'm like, it's fueling my body, it's doing what it needs to do. And so I think a lot of times with gluttony, it's not even that the issue is like, oh my gosh, like I just have these cravings, I have all these desires. It's not like that. It's more of like, dude, you're thinking about food too deeply. Just let it be neutral. Just eat what you like, eat what you want, but like realize that ultimately, if you actually listen to your body's not going to want sweet things for the rest of its life. It's just that's not how it works.
And
so
so
it's
I
like, go
guess,
ahead,
oh
go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. No, please,
No,
please.
you got it.
No, I really think I'm going to take this to a place that it's point of no return. Like I feel like you're still on the topic and I feel like I'm going to kind of,
No, go ahead, go ahead.
all right. So, cause the one thing that I've personally, I personally present day struggle with or have experienced more lately is the difference between being compassionate, self-compassionate to yourself versus maybe too permissive, versus being too authoritative, right? And so in my mind, I've long had this restrictive mentality, not so much about um I think it's more, I think, struggling with gluttony and binge eating and having a relationship with my body that was always about protecting its physical image. And so it was this constant war of like, I can't afford to binge eat or have all the sweets. And so you're right in a sense that like it's when you say overthinking food, like that's putting it maybe simply and like lightly. It's like viewing food as numbers and it is a very complex topic. And I'm just so curious to understand like one of the things I've fallen into the trap of was I've gotten to a point where it's like I no longer care what people think about my body. I'm secure. I've healed in so many other ways. And I've fallen into this trap of like, now I could just eat whatever I want. I can have as much as I want. And then like next thing I know, I actually put on like an unhealthy amount of weight, I think. Right. Like, and so I realized I'm like, wait, Mike, like, I think you kind of missed the point here. Like you sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater in a sense where you just allowed yourself to just let go in a sense. And like, you just started eating everything that you used to restrict for like the last 15 years. And so next thing I know, I'm like burgers and fries and shakes and hot dogs and like all the stuff. So how do you reel that in? And what's the difference in your mind between, actually serving your body with compassion versus not just allowing yourself to indulge in vices like gluttony?
Wow, that is such a wow. Okay, thank you for sharing that because I feel like I get that question as well a lot of like, is that what it means to go all in with eating disorder recovery? If you come from a restrictive background, does it mean just fueling your body with like constantly whatever you want, just give into it? I will say for some people, yeah, like for some people that's what they prefer to do to heal. For me, no. I had to like slowly add in fear foods and slowly add in things I was afraid of because that would have spiraled me. What I will say is regardless, if we go back to like the set point theory, your body will be where it wants to be at the end of that. So like say you continue to eat a bunch of food, at some point your body is going to be like tired of that. I assume like you got to the point where you were like, wow, I don't feel good. I feel sluggish. I've put on like way more weight than my body feels comfortable of. That's like literally your body signaling to you, we're over where we want to be. So a lot of people overshoot when they first gain weight. And then yeah, and then you'll slowly like kind of get back down to like where your body actually wants to be. So what I will say with that is you just have to be careful. Is that turning into a binge eating disorder where you feel like, "Oh, I'm not going back. Like I can't kind of like reel it back in and really connect with my body and its hunger and fullness cues? Is it developing into that? Or is this just a necessary part of my healing journey? I think those are like two completely different things. You just want to be very cautious of like, am I developing a binge eating disorder or is this part of my going all in? I know it's like and you can kind of like monitor that as you keep going. So like you might be a couple like weeks, months into this and you can kind of tell and self-monitor of like, "Oh, this feels very emotional. This feels very bingey." Or this feels like my body finally is getting what it needs after years of restricting. Those are two very different things. It's like emotional versus body intuition of like I'm feeding my body what it needs. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and then I think just, while I have the spotlight here of my own personal experiences, and what I think I've figured out for myself is that some of this is maybe even layered, where the root of where I'm probably needing to heal the most is probably more on the binge side. And there are triggers, like stress or what Matt talks about, like being tired or um uh, not feeling worthy or whatever it might be, um tends to trigger these like gluttonous behaviors. And I think instead of addressing that directly, what I have done in my life is I've layered in over the top of that a very restrictive mindset and like another unhealthy component of a different relationship with food, almost like layered on top of a one beneath it. And so what I thought I was solving, or what I thought was the root of the issue, was the restrictive side of it. And when I peeled that off, what really came up to surface was like what I let loose was like what I really think was the root issue, which is like, no, Mike, you have an unhealthy relationship with food, mostly rooted in the gluttony side of it. And so what are we doing to address that without, thinking that the solve is adding back in this like other restricted way of thinking about food? It's kind of just like this never ending perpetuating cycle of just unhealthy relationships with food. So you're right in the sense of like I've overswung, because I think what I really did was I put a false Band-Aid over the top, peeled that Band-Aid off, and it's just kind of like swinging back and forth, unhealthy relationship to unhealthy relationship, looks two different ways.
Oh my gosh, and I have to speak on this because Thank you. That was so reflective of the difference between I'm approaching this from a restrictive eating disorder perspective. So for someone like coming from a restrictive background, eating more foods, like doing kind of what you're talking about where you're like, I'll eat whatever I want. That's healthy. From a binge eating recovery perspective, no. Like you need to kind of work more on getting on a meal plan, eating a balanced amount of food. When those moments where you want to binge come up, emotionally processing it and using DBT skills to really work through those emotions so that
And
you're
prayer.
kind of yeah,
Seriously though, because the closer
yeah,
I feel to God, the less desire I have to binge, just generally speaking.
yeah,
I don't know if
that's
they're
cool.
No,
correlated, but
I
they
would
feel
agree with that.
correlated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, it's so funny you say that because I would argue too that, like, a relationship with God is part of DBT skills because DBT is all about regulating emotions, regulating thoughts and emotions so that when you're having those moments of spirals and I've been through a binge several times before because of my kinda, like, history, and it is very emotional. It's very like, "I need this, and I need it now." And when you connect with God, it really helps you like resettle your emotions and focus on a true deeper purpose that can kind of snap you out of that. And so I would totally say that God can be such a grounding force in those moments. What I will say with binging is, and I love how you said that, like so many people think that they have a restrictive eating disorder, but the issue is the binge. And binge and restriction are a cycle. They're very connected. So some people who have restrictive eating disorders might binge every now and then, like I did. Some people with binge eating disorders often have layered restrictive mindsets and a lot of shame around the fact that they binge that feeds that restrictive mindset. And so they may struggle with both as well. And so it really I was talking earlier about how I want someone to just take some knowledge, take some idea of like how can they grow and maybe this is it. Do you tend towards what you were just talking about, Mike, as someone who has that binge as their core, or are you tending towards the restriction as the core? I think that in and of itself can be a really helpful distinction for a lot of people to know where to start because it's very two different approaches.
Go ahead, MD.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say the latter. Like I think that the binge side of it is probably where I can where I feel like triggers are tethered to the behavior. Whereas I don't know that there are triggers tethered to restriction. I feel like restriction comes up and about very deliberately as a response to phases of binging.
Okay,
Makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
For me, yeah, it was like a therapy session, but I actually listened to a recent podcast this morning. It was awesome. I'm gonna actually recommend everyone go watch it on my stories. It was like a therapy, but it was really cool. Anyways, um, I'm so good when I'm in my routine. Like when I'm in my environment, my home. Now I travel a lot for work, but when I am home, I'm good. Like I got a core group of like foods that make me feel good. I enjoy like tasting them. I give gratitude before I eat. Like I'm just like thank you to everyone that made this happen because this brings so much joy to just have this meal, that type of stuff. Like I don't even think about, I'm good. Sometimes I'll have a snack here and there because I live in my parents right now. They like to have some snacks. I'm like, all right, I'll grab a couple dark chocolate pretzels. You bet. Um, but when I travel, for whatever reason, it is, and I think it is out of the routine, but it is a trigger. Maybe it's not even it's just being in a different environment, being on a plane. I don't, being on a plane makes me tired. And every time they bring over those pretzels, even if I'm full, I think that's my thing. Sometimes I'm full and I'm just like, if I'm tired, I want more. And I think part of that maybe is because like food actually does give you energy. So it does temporarily like give me a little bout of energy, but then I crash and I'm like more tired after, and then I'm full and stuffed and lethargic. Um, so that's my thing. I'm not really sure, but I will say I think me and my sisters, God, I'm just spilling out my tea here. Sorry, sisters, but like we struggled. Like that was our vice. Younger was always food. It's how we connect. Like I even sometimes when I'm on vacation with my sisters and my family, like be like, "Ooh, should we just get like a ton of snacks and just eat today? Just eat everything." And it's almost like a way of like relating to each other and like
Yeah.
bringing one together, which I like. I like that part of it, but I don't like how I then feel after.
Yeah.
Um, I will say this has got to be one of the most complex topics.
It's so
And
complex. It's so complex. Wow.
I don't have an answer for it. Like,
Yeah.
I love myself. I would say, generally speaking, the closer I feel to my faith, the closer I just feel connected to myself, the less just general desire, the more rested I am, the less desire I have to um, just put stuff in my body that I know isn't good for me. Like, it's more out of a place of comfort than a place of love.
Yeah.
And I just think about food a lot. I'm sure I'm not in the I'm probably in the majority, but I'm like, I'm going to, again, flying to Germany today. What should I have before? What if I don't eat before? Well, then I'm going to be a little hungry on the plane. Like, what if they don't have good food on the plane? Like, it is so
Yeah.
centered. And like, even doing, like, I did a 24-hour fast, which isn't, and honestly, because I felt God was like, dude, you need a detox. You just need to reset.
Yeah.
And it just opened my eyes to how much I think about food. I'm
Mm.
just like, whoa, I want to hear. I can't. It's like a net. It's like a just a natural kind of like tendency. So, anyways, I'll stop
Yeah.
there to see if you have any reaction to any of that.
Yeah, I love what you said because I think food can serve so many different roles in our lives. And I think some of those are healthy, like what you're describing. It actually sounds pretty healthy of like the community. Food is community. And it's very multifaceted too. So even when I was suffering from a restrictive eating disorder, that food being community like still existed. I think we each have to kind of look in and of ourselves and kind of see like what are my tendencies of using food for certain things. So, like, it's almost like I kind of feel like it's a couple different buckets. Food as like control, food as fear, like fear-based, food as emotional regulation, which I would say is more like that binging or like comfort food. Or food is like a form of connection and like community and things like that. And so I think where the issue comes in is when you start to value food as emotional regulation, control, or fear over just that community connection, fueling your body, just the day in and day out stuff. And so I think we just have to be so aware of what is the role of food in our lives. And a lot of that is just like we've been socially conditioned as kids. Like I know my dad always had ice cream in the, like, freezer, and so I love a sweet treat every single night after I eat my dinner because I saw my dad eat ice cream every single night after dinner, and it wasn't, like, crazy, it was just, like, a bowl of ice cream, and so that's just how I was raised and how I like food. I know my husband was raised on fast food and Southern comfort food, so an issue that he's facing is he has pretty high cholesterol because he continues to eat those foods. So, like, everyone's, like, socially conditioned too, and that's not bad. Like, you just have to find what actually works for you. My husband can still eat his comfort foods and eat the foods that bring him joy, and he needs to add in more vegetables because he doesn't eat vegetables. So, it's just I think everyone just kinda needs to give themselves a little bit of grace because our parents kind of reinforced certain messages about food growing up, and we were conditioned to view it in a certain way, and that really can shape how we see it currently.
That's so beautifully said, and I think in my education of this, the reason I think that as we talk about our relationship with food, the reason it's so complex is a lot of what you're describing is bio-individuality, where we all come from different backgrounds. We are all very different. And it's as simple as, your upbringing, what environment you grew up in. And there is a like a physiological response that we have unique to ourselves where we will eat foods that remind us of home or remind us of childhood. And it's connected to that sort of deep rooted spirituality that we have within us. And so that's why I think the topic gets so complicated. It's because your experience is not my experience. And
Yeah.
so how you get to a place of intuitive eating is going to look different than maybe how I get to my place. And that place is also going to look different. Then you layer in, and we're not going to go here because this rabbit hole's deep, but then you layer in how unhealthy or like how some of this food is manufactured and the types of hormonal responses and imbalances that come in, right? And so everything from, what Kobe just described, when you fly on a plane, your nervous system gets dysregulated. We're not meant to be 30,000 feet in the air moving at whatever speed that is. Like biologically, there's no world in which a human being is not going to feel some sort of level of stress and dysregulation from travel. I don't know
And I
And
wish
maybe
they would just at
people,
least make them healthy. I told them the other day, I said, guys, can you at least give me a healthy option? I'll pick the healthy option.
right.
I don't mind. But you're giving me this other stuff that I know is not going to make me feel good, but I'm dysregulated, so I kind of want it anyway, so I guess you can throw it out,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways.
and so like leading up to the flight, on the flight, after the flight, like you're having to regulate yourself before, during, and after, and otherwise, like again, depending on your bioindividuality, a lot of people's stress responses is a hormonal response tethered to food and how food might serve them in that regard. And so like that's why it's such a complex topic, and really it's bigger than just the food itself. I think if anyone is looking at this and peels the layers on this, they'll come to realize that this is really about like the overall composition of your being, everything from like your emotional, your mental, physical, and spiritual health all connected.
So
What,
well said. I completely agree.
Tori, what's the hardest part for you today about being in recovery? Like, where is Tori currently, like, having maybe a challenge?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question because I was thinking about that today. And I have come so far. Like, it's actually crazy.
I saw your story this morning. I was like, heck yeah, go
Yeah, oh
Tori.
my gosh, guys, I have my mug. Like, this is my mug from day one of my eating disorder treatment facility 2.5, 3 years ago. And I'm like, that's so crazy. Like, it actually broke and I like reordered it on Etsy. Like, that's how obsessive I was with it, but like, whatever. I don't use that mug that much anymore, but I just thought it was funny. So now I honestly, it's kinda crazy. I'm just, like, living my life. I'm just like, "Whatever." Like, I think I'm so purpose focused, like, God has shown me your purpose is to help people going through mental health struggles, to going through eating disorder stuff. I'm so focused on helping them that I'm like, "I need to fuel my body. I need to make sure I'm getting some movement in, but mainly I just, like, need to make sure I'm connecting with God and fulfilling my purpose and will that He's, like, placed on my life." And so that's, like, a really cool thing where you're just so focused on that heavenly perspective where you really don't care that much about the earthly things and, like, what people think of you and, like, how you look and all of that stuff. Obviously, it fluctuates day to day. I have a New York trip coming up, and I notice some of those desires of like, wow, I want to look a certain way. New York girls are so skinny. Like, I want to be pretty, all that stuff. So that's kind of what I'm like wrestling with currently of just like, Tori, chill. It's not that deep. But like, I have those ups and downs too. Like, I have those intrusive thoughts too, where I'm just like, oh, should I lose weight for this? And it's like, no, you're good, girl. So that's kind of where I'm at right
How do
now.
you balance that with like, well, what if I want to look good today? Like, what if I want to
Yeah.
dress up and feel good? Like, how do you balance those two things?
Yeah. I think when you're in like a stable place in recovery where you truly have done the work, you've done the self work, you feel like you kind of know yourself, you know your values, you know you're good in recovery, you can kind of just like give yourself a little more bit more leeway. Like you worked so hard, you deserve to feel confident about yourself and your body and like where you're at right now. Like am I a size 0 like I used to be when I had an eating disorder? No, but that doesn't matter. Like I can still have an amazing style, which I do, thank you, a great shoe collection. Like I can still be looking good. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just making sure that like when you want to look good, it's not coming from that like vanity, I want to look better than her, I want to be hot perspective. It's just like I want to show people like who I am, my individuality. I think that shift from like looking perfect to almost like I want to embrace my personal style has been so helpful for me because I think style is kind of what makes people really cool and unique and like hot almost. So, yeah, I think that's the personal style for sure.
So to wrap this up, and Tori, I don't say this often, but you're one of those guests. I feel like I could have like an hour and a half long conversation, 2 hour, and it would just boom, 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 boom
Oh my gosh,
flow.
you're so nice. I love you
Um,
guys. You guys are awesome.
what to wrap this up, what in life are you most proud of?
Ooh, um, most proud of. Wow, that's like such a good question because I've like been thinking a lot lately of how I kind of told myself like it was all me. I'm the one who did this and I'm the one who did that. And honestly, it's almost like the thing I'm most proud of is surrendering to God fully and surrendering to the power of the Holy Spirit because when you live for something bigger than yourself, you realize that you don't have to put as much pressure on yourself and that everything is just a gift. like, I've done what I need to do in this life. I've accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and I've told people about him, period. So I'm good. Like, I'm good. Everything else is a bonus. You know what I mean? So I think, like, just that shift that I had in that perspective, I would say, like, earlier this year is where it really clicked. And I was like, you know what? We're good. Like, we've done what we need to do. I think that's the thing I'm most proud of.
I could feel the shift. I could see and feel it from the time we last spoke to the time today, but then also your content, how it's like just evolved.
Oh my
I
God,
could,
thank you. I appreciate that. That's so kind.
yeah, truly. Well, Tori, Peyton, Wilson, everyone. Tori, thank you so much.
Thank you.